Hi programmers! Today we're going to talk about a special kind of function called a constructor. So I've started with this little example. I've got a class cat. There are two private fields. Every cat has a weight and a name, and there's two public functions to set the values, weight and name, and to display the values. And one of our functions is an inline function with the whole body of the function right here, and the other function we've got a prototype and the body of the function is outside of that class definition, just to show two different ways to do it. In main, first I'm creating just a simple variable x and setting it to 5, then I'm creating a cat, setting the values to 10 and sunshine for the weight and the name, and then displaying that cat. So I go ahead and run it, and everything works well, but you might wonder why with a primitive data type like a float or an int or a char, you can go ahead and initialize the variable at the same time that you're declaring it. You're allocating space and memory and then putting something in that space. Well, why is it that you can do that in that kind of a case, but not in the case of a class? Well, you can do it in the case of a class, we just haven't learned that yet. So the way to do the same kind of thing in one line, and actually it's going to end up looking more like this. So this is another way to give an initial value to this variable x. We're going to do the same kind of thing with our cat, and instead of a set values, if we want to do this all at the time that we're allocating the memory for that cat, we can actually do it in one line if we create a function called a constructor. So I'm going to change the name of this function and get rid of the return type, and I'm going to give it the same name as the class, and this becomes our constructor function. And notice that everything is looking good and I haven't made very many changes, and this will still compile and run. So constructors do have the same name as the class, and also there's no return type, which seems a little weird because usually we're used to something, at least the word void, even if it doesn't return anything, but with this constructor, it's not even going to have void. Alright, so that's an example of a constructor, an example of a destructor. So when this object goes out of scope, there's another special kind of function we can make, and the name of it is almost the same as the class name, only there's a tilde in front of that. So I'm going to just say cat runs away. We'll have that print every time a cat goes out of scope. So we'll go ahead and run this, and we're only creating one cat here, and it goes out of scope as soon as main ends. So when we run the program, we're going to see the cat information is displayed, and then when this variable goes out of scope, the destructor is called automatically, and we see the cat runs away. Well, we learned about function overloading, and it is possible to overload even a constructor function. So what if I make another function that's a cat, a constructor function, and I'm going to put the body of the function down here to show that you get this cat scope resolution operator cat for constructors, because the name of the class is the first thing that you have, then the scope resolution operator, and then the name of the function, and they're both the same. So as a default, if somebody creates a cat, then we could give it some default values for the weight. Oops, weight is equal to maybe 5 pounds, and the name is equal to Fluffy. And so what this allows us to do, to have a cat constructor function that has no input arguments, is we could now say the cat is, and then we don't have to pass anything in parentheses, and then we can call the display function just to make sure that it is using those default values. And note that we don't have any parentheses here after our variable f. When we're calling the default constructor, you don't need parentheses. And it is using that Fluffy and 5 pounds for the values for our fields here. And now we have two calls to the destructor because our two cat variables go out of scope. And another thing that's worth noting, so you can have as many constructors as you want as long as they have a different number of arguments or different types of arguments. And another thing worth noting is that if you don't have any constructors at all, then one will be created for you by the compiler.